Hi, and welcome to this edition of Frequently Asked Questions about Noise, Vibration, and Acoustics. I'm Jessica Tinianov, a Senior Engineer and Associate at HGC Engineering. In this series, we answer questions that we frequently get from our clients or that get posed on our website about noise, vibration, and acoustics. Today's question is, why is my private office or boardroom not so private? So the first thing we need to establish is what we mean by private. Speech privacy is essentially not being able to hear conversations from within a space in the surrounding areas to varying degrees. Now, there's a number of different metrics that we can use to evaluate speech privacy, and we're not going to talk about those today, but the important thing to understand is that regardless of what metric you're using, the amount of privacy that you need is going to vary from situation to situation. In some cases, being able to hear some audible but muffled and unintelligible conversations might be completely fine. Like when you have a boardroom and the surrounding area is open office cubicles and your goal really is just not to distract the other workers too much. Whereas in other situations, you may need to eliminate entirely or minimize to the extent possible hearing any conversations, like a law office or a medical clinic where you need to be concerned about personal information privacy. Being able to identify less compatible adjacencies and benchmarking expectations, things like that are key reasons why it's important to get an acoustic consultant involved as early as possible in the design process. Another reason to get an acoustic consultant involved early is the cost and practical limitations of implementing acoustic solutions after the fact. Of course, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes speech privacy gets overlooked or missed. Sometimes things change, maybe the use of a space changes, and sometimes the problems just don't present themselves until after the fact. And an acoustic consultant can still help in these situations. We're going to talk about some key factors that we see time and time again contributing to a lack of speech privacy. Typically, there's three main components that we need to look at when we're evaluating speech privacy: the sound level at the source, the sound path between the source and the receiver, and the background sound level at the receiver. In order to improve speech privacy, typically one or more of these three things needs to be adjusted. So let's talk about the path between the source where the sound is made and the receiver where the sound is heard. How do we adjust this? Well, we can implement barriers, we can add absorptive and reflective materials to direct the sound, and we can look to find and eliminate or minimize any leakage or flanking paths. One of these key areas is actually the ceiling. So a lot of times the wall between two spaces stops at the underside of the ceiling. It doesn't go through. And that leaves you with an open cavity that's common across the two spaces. Sound can literally break into the ceiling space, bypass the wall, no matter how good it is acoustically, and come out the other side of the space. In addition to that, these ceilings are often full of holes for lights, for HVAC, return air grills, speakers, all sorts of things. Sometimes you even get a ceiling tile that's common over the two spaces and a grid that goes right over the wall, leaving a gap. And a rule of thumb for acoustics is if light can go through something, sound can also go through it. So what do we do about this? Well, we can extend the wall up past the ceiling to the underside of the structure above, be it the roof or the floor above you, to break that common path. If you can't go all the way up, at least part way up. Another thing we can do is improve the acoustic performance of the ceiling itself so that not as much noise can get in and get out. We do that by using ceiling tiles with a higher CAC rating, with a drywall ceiling instead, by adding mass or insulation on the back of the ceilings. We can take these holes that I mentioned and try to either eliminate them or move them farther away, treat the backs of them, and all sorts of other strategies that we can look at. What about the wall itself? Well, the wall can have a really good acoustic value and we can address the ceiling path, but we also need to look at the perimeter around the wall. We need to look at where this wall meets other walls, where it meets the window, where it meets the floor, where it meets the ceiling or the structure, and inspect all of those areas for any potential acoustic weak points that we can then address. We also need to look at things that may be going through the wall, pipes, ducts, common ducts that might be open on both sides, and look around all of those things with the mindset that anywhere light can go through, sound can also go through. And we can't forget about the door. The door is often a very weak point acoustically. It's always going to be weaker than your wall, but there's some things that we can do to limit that. We can get a good door, insulated, solid core, but the important thing is really going to be around the perimeter of the door. If there's no seals, or if the seals are improperly adjusted, or if the seals don't have something hard to push against to engage them, like a really well-designed frame, or like a threshold or a hard floor for a bottom seal, that will create a gap and a very weak point acoustically. So the last thing we're going to talk about today is background sound. It might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes, to improve speech privacy, we actually need to add sound. We of course can't add too much sound or we'll introduce a different noise problem. But if you think about it, when your surroundings are exceptionally quiet, you can quite literally hear a pin drop. We start to add in other noises like a printer running, a phone ringing, some HVAC going, fans, conversation down another desk beside you. Now you suddenly can't hear that private office conversation quite as much. One way to introduce a constant, reliable, customizable background sound is with sound masking. We're not going to discuss the different types of sound masking systems today, but there are a number of different systems out there that can be implemented to help. Typically, these are placed on the receiver side. So that's our question for today. I hope you learned a little bit about what can contribute to poor speech privacy and what kinds of things can be done to help. If you have any questions or any ideas for future videos, please reach out. Thank you for watching.